fleets mustered at Messina early in the autumn of 1571. The force, led thither by Don John, consisted of 70 Spanish galleys, 6 Maltese, and 3 of Savoy. The papal squadron under Marc Colonna added 12 galleys. The Venetian admiral Veniero brought 108 galleys and 6 huge galleasses, or mahons of a larger size and carrying a heavier weight of metal than had yet been known in Mediterranean warfare. Great care had been paid by all the confederates to the proper selection of their crews and the equipment of their vessels. Nobly born volunteers from all parts of Roman Catholic Christendom had flocked together to serve under so celebrated a chief as Don John, and in such an honorable enterprise. And the Christian fleet sailed across the sea to seek its enemies eastward of the Ionian Gulf in the highest state of efficiency. The Turkish naval force were assembled in the Gulf of Krones. The Captain Pasha Muezzinzade Ali was commander-in-chief, and under him were the well-known Uluç Ali Beylerbey of Algiers, Cafer Pasha Beylerbey of Tripoli, Hasan Pasha of the son of Hayrettin Barbarossa, and 15 other beys of maritime sanjaks, each of whom was entitled to hoist his banner on his galley as a prince of the sea. The troops embarked on board the fleet were commanded by Pertev Pasha. The fleet amounted to 240 galleys and 60 vessels of similar size. Uluç Ali and Pertev Pasha represented to the commander-in-chief that the fleet was hesitantly to imperfectly manned, and that it was imprudent to fight a general battle until it was in a better state of equipment. But Muezzinzade's courage prevailed over his discretion, and the destruction of his fleet was the result. On the 7th October 1571, a little after noon, the Christian fleet appeared near the entrance of the Gulf of Patras, off the little islands of Cursolari, the ancient Echinades, which lie at the mouth of the Aspropotamo, the Achelous of the Albanian shore. The Ottoman fleet sailed out of the Gulf of Lepanto to encounter them and formed in line of battle. Uluç Ali, commanding the left wing, Muhammed Shahlah Bey Negropont, heading the right wing, and the Captain Pasha, aided by Pertev Pasha, being in the center. Then in the center, Don John drove up his chief force.
Wusstest du, dass Leute auf TikTok beispielsweise diese
Uluç Ali, by commanding the left wing, Mohammed Shahlah Bey the Negropont, heading the right wing, and the Captain Pasha, aided by Pertev Pasha, being the center. Don Joe drove up his chief force in the center of the form of crescent. The Prince of Parma, afterwards so well known in Holland and in the intended conqueror of England, the Admiral of Savoy, Caracoli, the Napolitan Admiral, and other illustrious leaders were in command of it the Marquis of Santa Cruz commanded a squadron that was stationed in the rear of the main line as a reserve. A division of stationed in the rear of the main line as a reserve. A division of 53 galleys under the Venetian Provveditore Urbagio formed the right wing, and the left wing consisted of 54 galleys under Gian Andrea Doria, nephew of the great admiral of the Emperor Charles. Don John took his own station in advance of the center line, and the other two admirals of the fleet, Colonna and Veniero, were at his sides. The Turkish Captain Pasha, seeing this, brought forward his own galley and those of Peter Pasha and his treasure to answer the challenge of the three admiral galleys of the Christians that thus stood forward between the battles like the Promachi in the conflicts of the Homeric heroes. Don John showed his gallantry is thus taking the post of danger, but he also showed his skills by placing the six great Venetian galleasses, like redoubts, at intervals in front of the Confederate fleet. The Turks had less fear of these huge vessels than might have been justified by the event of the day. But there was a pause before they began the attack, and each fleet lay motionless for a time, regarding with admiration and secret awe the strength and the splendor of the adversary array. At length the Turkish admiral fired a gun, charged with the powder only as a challenge to begin the action. A ball from one of Don John's heaviest cannon whizzed through the Ottoman rigging in answer. The Turks rowed forward with loud shouts amid the clangor of their drums and fifes to the attack and the action commencing on the Christian left soon became general along the line. The large Venetian galleasses now proved of the utmost service to the Christian fleet. The Turkish galleys passing them were obliged to break their order, and the fire kept up by a Venetian artilleryman from the heavy ordnance of the galleys was more artillerymen from the heavy ordnance of the galleys was more destructive than ever yet had been witnessed in naval gunnery. Still the Turks pressed forward and engaged the Christian left and center with obstinate courage. The two high admirals of the conflicting fleets, Don John and Mirza Ali, encountered each other with equal gallantry. Their vessels clashed together and then lay closely locked for upward of 2 hours, during which time the 300 janissaries and 100 arquebusiers of the Turks and the 400 chosen arquebusiers who served and board Don John's ship fought with the most determined bravery. The two other admirals' galleys of the Christians had come to the support of Don John, and the Captain Pasha's galley was similarly aided by her consorts. so that these 6 ships formed a compact mass in the midst of the battle, like that which was grouped round Nelson in the victory. By the Temeraire, the Redoubtable, and the Neptune at the Battle of the Trafalgar. The deeds of Mazinzadeh, who fell shot dead by a musket ball, decided the memorable contest. The Turkish admiral galley was carried by boarding, and when Santa Cruz came on to support the first line with the reserve, the whole Ottoman center was broken, and the defeat soon extended to the right wing. In their left, Uluj Ali was more successful. He outmaneuvered Doria, turned his wing, and attacking his ships, when disordered and separated one from another, Uluj Ali captured 15 Maltese and Venetian galleys, and with his own hand struck off the head of the commandant of Messina. But seeing that the day was irreparably lost for Turkey, Uluj collected 40 of his best galleys, pushed with them through the Christian vessels that tried to intercept him, and stood safely out to sea. They were the only Turkish vessels that escaped the Ottomans, lost in this great battle 260 ships, of which 94 were sunk, burnt or run aground and destroyed upon the coast. The rest were captured and divided among the allies. 30,000 Turks were slain, and 50,000 Christians who had served as galley slaves in the Ottoman fleet were rescued from captivity. The Confederates lost 15 galleys and 8,000 men. Many princely and noble names are recorded in the lists of the killed and wounded of that day, but there is none which we had read with more interest than the servants. The author of Don Quixote and served at Lepanto as a volunteer in the regiment of Moncada, which was distributed among the part of fleet. On the day of the battle, Cervantes was stationed on board of the galley Marquesa, and though suffering severely with illness, he distinguished himself greatly in the action, during which he received 2 arquebus wounds, one of which maimed his left hand for life. He often referred with just pride to the loss of his hand, and ever rejoiced at having been present at the glorious action at Lepanto, on that day so fortunate to Christendom, when, in his own words, all nations were undeceived of their error in believing that the Turks were invincible at sea. The glories of the fight of Lepanto thrilled Christendom with rapture, and they have for centuries been the favorite themes of literature and art. But the modern German historian well observes that we ought to drink with sadness of the nullity of the results of such a battle, after occupying 3 weeks in dividing the spoils of Lepanto, and nearly coming to blows over them, the Christian squadrons returned to their respective ports, to be thanked, lauded, and dismissed. Meanwhile, the indefatigable Uluç Ali, indefatigable, indefatigable, Uluç Ali, Uluç Ali with the squadron which he had saved from Lepanto gleaned together the Turkish galleys that day in the different parts of the archipelago, and at the end of December sailed broadly into the port of Constantinople at the head of a fleet of 87 sail. In recompense of his zeal, he received the rank of Captain Pasha, and the Sultan changed his name to Uluç Ali into Kılıç, which means the sword. The veteran Admiral Piale, the hero of Djerbe, was yet alive, and under his and Kılıç Ali's vigorous and skillful directions, a new fleet was constructed and launched before the winter was past. While the rejoicing Christians built churches, the result Turks built docks. The effect was that before June a Turkish fleet of 215 sail, comprising 8 galleasses of Mahons of the largest size, sailed forth to assert the dominion of the seas. The Confederate Christian powers, after long delays, collected a force numerically superior to the Ottoman, but so too indecisive encounters took place, they were unable to chase Kılıç Ali from the western coast of Greece. Nor could the Duke of Parma undertake the siege of the Modon, which had been designed as a chief operation for that year. It was evident that, though the Christian confederates could win a battle, the Turk was still their superior in war. The Venetians sought peace in 1573, and in order to obtain it, consented not only that the Sultan should retain Cyprus, but that Venice should pay him his expenses of the conquest. It was not unnaturally remarked by those who heard the terms of the letter of the treaty that it sounded as if the Turks had gained the battle of Lepanto. After Venice had made peace with the Porte, Don John undertook the expedition with the Spanish fleet against Tunis, which Uluç Ali had conquered during the year in which Cyprus was attacked. Don John succeeded in capturing the city, which was the more easy inasmuch as the citadel has continued in the power of the Spaniards. Don John built a new fortress and left a powerful garrison in Tunis, but 18 months after his departure his old enemy Kılıç Ali repaired there, and after a sharp siege made the Sultan again master of the city and citadel, and stormed Don John's new castle. Tunis now, like Algiers and Tripoli, became an Ottoman government. The effectual authority which the Porte exercised over this practical states of North Africa, which are often called the barbarous regencies, grew weaker in course of time. But the tie of allegiance was not entirely broken, and so the French have in our own time seized Algiers. The Sultan is still sovereign of Tripoli and Tunis, the scenes of the successful valor of Dragut and Kilij Ali.